Post-millennial, undecided voters lean Trump after suffering from Hitler fatigue. Yep, I get it. I think part of the reason why I'm being pushed towards Trump so strongly is I find the Democrats and the left keep going straight to Hitler all the time with everything.
So in the same lifetime now, when people go to movies, they talk about superhero fatigue. So we now have superhero fatigue and Hitler fatigue at the same time.
When Kamala Harris came out and said Donald Trump said he wanted generals like Hitler, I tweeted, this is going to boost Trump in the polls. Because we're at the point now where a lot of moderates are just like, oh, you know what? Just for that, I'm voting for Trump. I am so sick of that stupid garbage.
The problem is this movie's boring. This is supposed to be a Transformers sequel where it's like, okay, we've got all these crazy Trump scandals. Grab them by the, they were doing the Trump Hitler stuff in 2015. 2015, they were saying he's got quotes of Mein Kampf on his dresser, and some ex-girlfriend 30 years ago said it.
Not only this, the quote about wanting generals was published in 2022. So the Atlantic publishes a story acting like it's new, but it came out years ago and it was debunked. They've got an anonymous source who claims it happened, and then two on the record sources saying it didn't happen. So by any journalistic standards, it did not happen.
And when they rolled it out, they said, and there's an audio, it hasn't been published yet, but there's an audio, the same thing they said about Trump saying the N-word in an elevator, one day. The whole thing.
Well, the elevator thing is funny. You know the Huffington Post elevator story, right? I always got to pull this one up. Let's see. Huffington Post. What do they call it? A white whale? Trump elevator x.com. This is one of the greatest tweets ever in breaking down what the corporate press is. And it is this. A tape might exist of Trump doing something in an elevator, though exactly where that somewhere is and what that something might be, no one in media can say. That's because no one in media seems to have seen the tape or is even confident that it exists. Okay, this was 2018, Huffington Post saying somewhere at some point Trump may have done something and someone may have recorded it. We don't know what he may have done, where it might have been, who might have recorded, and no one's ever seen any evidence of this happening. Holy crap.
14th Amendment. That man can't hold office.
Insane.
He may have done something in an elevator.
That's the only noun available. The only information is that Trump at some point went in an elevator. That's their story.
Yeah.
This is what they've been doing nonstop since 2015. Mm-hmm. Holy crap. It's been nearly 10 years.
I'm saying that's why it works so well, right? What I'm saying, what it works on is that the average person who just would have been undecided but doesn't really like the guy, they're left with the negative impression because all they're hit with daily is negative story.
No, this is the point. It's fatigue.
I can't. I think part of the reason why I'm being pushed towards Trump so strongly is that I find that the Democrats and the left just keep going straight to Hitler all of the time with everything. Like it, and if it's not the left pushing Hitler, it's the right pushing Stalin. So it's like we're fighting World War II every single day for every single election. So it's so exhausting. I think it just it pushes me away from their position, and it's so hyperbolic that it makes it impossible to have good discussions, and I think it ruins the discourse.
Does anybody think it's valuable or something you want to hear from the vice president? Anybody raise their hand?
They're all saying no. Every single person shaking their head no.
What are we talking about? Anybody?
Nope. They all just shook their heads no. Nobody wants to hear this. All they're doing is pushing Hitler.
That's
and if it's not the left pushing Hitler, it's the right pushing Stalin. I mean, the right's not really pushing Stalin. But whatever.
Well, I mean, they say communism in general. And that's also different because when they talk about the left doing it, they're talking about not just politicians, but the mainstream press, which is able to signal boost this far greater than right-wing media, which is confined to smaller networks, Fox, I guess. But also a lot of it's going on X for right-wing politics, whereas the left is more mainstream.
Mm-hmm. I identify with this so strongly. It's funny. I wonder if they've been listening to me talk and they're like, oh, yeah, and Ian's got Hitler fatigue. I'm just so tired.
That's what it is.
Nonsense. Like the hate, the scare you tactic is just done, man. And I noticed this last week. I just didn't feel. I was like, oh, I'm getting like resilient.
And they used Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic, the guy who lied us into the Iraq war. On faking weapons of mass destruction. This is the guy that they roll out for this.
It's ridiculous. Anytime I see whether it be Bill Kristol or any of the cohorts. I'm just like, I can't believe these guys are actually allowed to speak in public.
But this is what they do. This is an intelligence network. Ann Applebaum is the marquee staff writer over there at The Atlantic. She's also a board member on the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA cutout. She was busted. Her name appears in the UK inner cluster cell of the Integrity Initiative, which is this big British intelligence op to start censoring the internet in 2015, where they told in the instruction manuals to be helpfully uninformative about sources of funding for the organization as they were recruiting into their, quote, inner cluster cell high-ranking members of a country's military, journalism class, regulators, captains of industry, in order to rig the information economy in every country in NATO to control who gets elected. And then it was busted when all these documents leaked, and so it's shut down in disgrace. And lo and behold, Ann Applebaum's name is in the UK inner cluster cell of that.
You specify which documents you're referring to?
Yes, the Integrity Initiative leaks. It was a 7-part leak. Came out in like 2018, 2019. You can literally run a search on my handle right now for Ann Applebaum or for Integrity Initiative. And I have a whole, multi-million view thread going through all the major receipts where her network's implicated.
You know, you mentioned NATO, and I do feel like this blob is, I guess, the liberal economic order. This is what it's turned into. And I've been thinking it's a bit of a zoom out from inside the blob where we are to BRICS. And we can stay focused on this too, but I want to know, is BRICS like another blob? And if so, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. It's another economic order that's been growing over the last decade. I don't know how long it's been around, but is it another blob? And if so, and if not, how do you see these two organizations interacting, the blob and the BRICS?
Yeah, it's a China-led. Every country has at least a mini blob, right? I mean, every country has a version of a State Department. It's usually called a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MFA. In the UK, it's the UK Foreign Office. But essentially, this is how you participate in the world around you. No country is an island. You can't even make a pencil in the United States without getting, the erasers from gum trees in Malaysia and graphite from mines in South America. You need to interact in the world in order to have goods and services. The State Department, for example, is the first thing we set up in the U.S. government. In 1789, we formed only 3 government agencies: the State Department, the Department of War, which is now the Department of Defense, and the U.S. Treasury. I mean, it's your founding government agency, and so the moment you have that, you need an apparatus to get your way in the world with other countries, and so the intelligence services are folded into it. The military coordinates with it, and so everyone seeks to influence world events, and so you need a blob to do that. You need a foreign-facing operations corps who is able to exert leverage, who is able to do intelligence, who is able to run operations. But China does that mostly through economic soft power, through what sometimes called debt trap diplomacy, but oftentimes it's just simply trade. Europe, for example, now does more trade with China than with the U.S. They overtook them, I believe, in 2020. China has gotten huge influence over Africa through building their ports, building their roads, building their public health, building their infrastructure. And in return, the African governments vote their way in multilateral institutions, vote their way in the UN. It's a favors for favors relationship. Now, the U.S. dollar has been one of the main mechanisms for U.S. economic soft power projection, a way to get influence over foreign governments because they are dependent on the U.S. dollar. Everything's transacted that way. Dollar supremacy has been one of the ways that we have led the world order. As China has risen economically, and China has developed partners all around the world in BRICS nations and beyond, they are competing now against the dollar to dislodge it as the sort of economic, currency primacy coin of the realm. We've seen Saudi Arabia, for example, signal it's not going to renew the petrodollar and that it's going to use a basket of currencies that may be led by the Chinese renminbi. I do think it's interesting that news just today broke that Brazil just blocked Venezuela from joining BRICS, which I find very interesting because the State Department worked assiduously to rig the Brazilian election, to censor every Bolsonaro supporter on every social media platform, plus all the encrypted chat apps, ran this whole operation. The State Department back-channeled with Taiwan in order to get electronic voting machines into Brazil against the will of the Brazilian prime minister. The Defense Department, Lloyd Austin, swooped down to Brazil to threaten Bolsonaro. The CIA director, Bill Burns, personally flew down to Brazil to threaten Bolsonaro. The State Department diverted semiconductor chips meant for the U.S. just to get more electronic voting machines into Brazil, even though the government of Brazil didn't want it. And then, so Lula's installed. By the way, Lula was named Man of the Year by the union arm of the National Network for Democracy, the CI, so make of that of what you will. And then Lula comes in just today and is seen as backstabbing Venezuela. A lot of people thought that this would go through with Venezuela being joined with BRICS because everyone accused Lula of being a communist and Maduro is a communist in Venezuela. But at the 11th hour, Lula backstabs Maduro and says, actually, you're not going to be allowed in BRICS. I wonder if the State Department called in favors to their little puppet in Brazil, Lula, and in exchange for basically getting him into power and helping him consolidate power, he, takes out one of their adversary states whose government the State Department is trying to overthrow.
Do you conceive that Brazil will leave BRICS then?
No, I think that and BRICS is not. It's not fully formed enough. It's not going to be a threat until it's a little bit more mature than it is currently. And there's only so much leverage that the U.S. has against China. The fact is as a matter of gross, China probably does have a larger economy than us at this point, just as a matter of gross on that. But so there's only so much leverage that we can exert. We can't get our way the way we used to 30 years ago. The world is not unipolar. Again, most countries do more trade with China, and so the Chinese Ministry of Affairs has a larger pull on those countries than the U.S. I ran into that at State when I was at the International Telecommunications Union at State Department Cyber. All 40 countries or so in the African Union systematically vote with China for what they want on telecom, and there's almost nothing we can do to convince them. Because how do you argue against the fact that China is their economic lifeline? All you can do at that point is either bribe them with more money, and we're spread too thin with all of our other operations around the world, or threaten them. And there's only so much you can threaten them before they turn even more to China to offset those threats.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.